So, you have a bunch of Morannon Orcs looking grey and unpainted in your collection, or you have just bought the exciting new starter set, Battle of 𝗠cie𝗿𝐻𝐻, and thought, damn, that's a lot of orcs. Let's go. We begin today with an orc that has been undercoated with a black spray. And with a makeup brush, some spaceship exterior was applied to the outer sections of the sculpt, leaving the darker recessed areas black. The same was done to the sanded base, which was glued on before the video. A little bit of preparation work was done with the spear, with some black lines. This would represent a quick wood grain effect once we have painted the next layer of brown. We are going to use Army Painter Speedpaints for the majority of this miniature, but don't worry if you do not have them, as you could get a similar look by mixing some normal acrylic paint with a medium. The key here is to be fairly precise with the application of colours. If you get some on an unwanted area, then simply get a damp brush and take it off where necessary. The hardened leather was then thinned down with some water to turn it into a wash, or a shade, and applied onto the fur. Next we used some dark wood mixed with some speed paint medium, and this was painted onto all of the armour sections. Notice that the black undercoat in the recessed areas affects how dark the speed paint layer will be once dry. This pre-shading technique with the black and white has been around for years, but with the release of new products such as speed paints, contrast paints and inks, it makes this type of painting very satisfying and quick to do. Which is great as it makes painting a vast amount of miniatures less daunting. The base was given a liberal amount of this paint. This shall be our initial ground cover colour, and we will paint the rest later on in the video. Now for the cloth. Some purple and black were painted on. These two colours were mixed with medium once more to make the paint more translucent. The more medium used, the thinner it will be, and the brighter the overall look shall be due to the white underneath. For this orc, it was about a 75% paint to 25% medium ratio. And finally, we are going to give him a nice green skinned look. I did notice that the features of the face are quite shallow in this sculpt, and you do get this from time to time with some older plastic kits. So we will do some extra work later on to try and create some detail on him. All we need to do now is pick out the straps. This could have been achieved with speed paint, but it will be quicker with a normal acrylic paint in this instance. Finally, black was added to the excess plastic areas of the sculpt due to how it was cast. This section is just a void area, so black will do just fine here. Switching over to a slightly worn and used brush, we are now going to use a heavy dry brush technique where we will add the metals. For those new to miniature painting, this technique involves getting a brush. For heaven's sake, don't use your best ones. Adding some paint on as normal, but before applying it onto the miniature, you take off the majority using a cloth or something similar, which will leave some paint in the bristles. And you can now glide the brush over the metals to pick out the edges of the armour. You can prod the bristles to create an uneven stippled look to the armour plates also. For this orc, we did both. Overall, this is a fairly quick method to do, and you will see your collection start to grow by using simple techniques just like these. If you want your orcs as a quick game-ready standard, then this will be good enough, and you can jump to the basing section of the video. Just use the timestamps below in the description. But if you are like me and want to go that little bit extra, then we can move on. But before that, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody that watches these videos, and I'm going to take this one step further by starting a Patreon page, where there'll be even more juicy hobby content. There is also a Discord server where we can all hang out and chat hobby, show our work in progress and our finished projects. And on top of that, my friends, there will be downloadable painting guides, behind the scenes footage, early access to videos, and community contests with prizes. There's lots going on, so if you like this kind of content and enjoy watching the videos, then consider being a patron. To find out more, check out the link in the description below. So back to Timothy the Orc. We start by adding some darker shaded areas to the face. This will start to bring out the flatter areas of our sculpt. As that's drying, we can pick out other details such as the fur. This was given more punch by adding some fire giant orange over the existing hardened leather. The hair was also given a highlighted look by using dry rust first on the left, and this was followed by troll claws on the right, giving him a pretty cool punk rock hairstyle. The straps were also made to look brighter by giving them a layer of sulfide ochre. These little details really start to stand out over the darker areas such as the cloth and the metals. The black cloth really didn't need too much doing to it. Just a singular highlight of Filthy Cape was used to pick out the cloth folds, as most of the work was done with the pre-shade black and white. I went over with this twice. The first time was a faint highlight where the paint was mixed with some water. And the second time, the paint was applied over parts of the folds to create a lighter looking highlight. Some warriors do have a shield. This was pre-shaded in the exact same way as our Morannon Orc, and 𝐒𝐿𝐴 speed paint was applied over the wood section. A dark wood speed paint was then used to pick out the grain as well as the gaps between the wood. We then applied a mid-tone colour of desert yellow, and this was mainly to highlight the areas of the wood as well as help the gradient between the darker brown and the lighter sand golem. A series of lines was then painted on with troll claws. This was a final highlight to our wood grain effect. You could do a similar technique with the orc spears as well, but for the ones on the video today, they were painted differently, just to make them look like they've used different materials. Finally, the metal rim of the shield was painted in the same way as our armour. Now for the most satisfying part of the model, the purple. Mainly because I don't paint purple too often. Some Grimoire purple mixed with quick shade medium, about a 50-50 mix, was layered onto our existing purple. We want to leave the darker shaded areas and mainly focus on the top sections of the cloth to make them brighter. This time I painted the layers twice to the desired colour. As the medium makes the paint more translucent, you can build up the amount of layers to your desired effect. And a highlight of mutant hue was added to further pick out the creases and the edges of the cloth. So we should be sitting pretty with something like this. Now for the skin. We are going to create some cooler looking tones for the shaded areas. So blue tone was applied between the fingers and sections of the head. For the latter, we focused on the area nearest the hairline, as well as the indented cheek areas of our orc. We just want a subtle gradient to occur between these newly painted areas and our original colour beneath. Just work the paint around a bit with a brush, as these shade paints take longer to dry than the rest of the acrylic paint range. To get a lighter looking skin tone, necrotic flesh mixed with medium again, around about a 50-50 mix, was then applied to the pronounced areas of the flesh. The upper parts of the head and face were painted here as well, such as the ears, cheekbone and forehead. A tip here would be to go over these areas once, let the paint fully dry, and then pick out any areas again you would like to make lighter. Afterwards, you can then pick out the facial features such as the nose and the mouth. I always like to add a further highlight to the lowest area such as the chin. I feel like doing so frames the face nicely, especially with the darker neck areas directly underneath. Someone made a comment on a previous video asking for more orc skin tones. So if you would like to see a video on that topic, then like and comment on this one to show your support. Our orc was given a final embellishment by picking out his teeth and eyes with some mummy robes paint. And what a lovely smile he has. As these Morannon Orcs have all but laid waste to 𝗠cie𝗿𝐻ฤ, they will be scuttling around in the rubble and the dirt of this once great city. So to represent this, their armour has been weathered with patches of crusader skin placed onto the metals. This is an optional extra, but I think it's worth it for the few extra seconds it takes. And if you want to take this further, then the armour has been highlighted with some shining silver. This is the longest process out of the steps so far today, but I think it's well worth it in the end once they are all completed and on the battlefield. Onto the basing. These Morannon Orcs are coming from a desolate ash waste, so to represent this, there will be a simple basing style for these. The sand, as you know, has already been painted with dark wood earlier. Some patches of 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐻 and High Lord Blue were added to create an uneven look to the surface. And this was finished off with a light dry brush of skeleton bone. This was not applied too thickly as we want the colour underneath to still be present. The rim of the base was also painted in a dark drab colour to follow the desolate terrain theme. Finally, to give the miniature a bit more visual interest, a couple different colours of static grass were glued on using PVA glue. These are both 2mm grasses as I wanted the vegetation to be sparse and dry looking. Now for a fun and alternative colour scheme for our Morannon Orcs. A couple of elements, such as the black and the wood, have already been painted using our guide previously. But for the metals, we start with rough iron, rather than the dark wood speed paint. This not only will give us a dark base coat to begin with, but will give our metallics that little bit more shine than our previous orc. We are also going red for the cloth this time, and slaughter red speed paint was the colour of choice. Like before, using the speed paint allows us to get through miniatures that little bit quicker, and you can just use this red for the final colour. However, we are going to use this as a base coat to our acrylic paints in a moment. A little trick with the speed paints is that you can use a hairdryer to nudge their magic along a bit so that you can apply the next layer almost instantly. For our second orc skin tone today, we are going blue. Just because I like you and I want to show off as much as I can in these videos. Once our blue has completely dried, the skin was made lighter by applying some wolf grey mixed with medium. Much like what we did with our previous orc, the upper parts of the hand and face were painted. The final highlight was done with the Ice Storm, and this is quite a bright colour anyway, so you don't need too much of this. Just the knuckles and the facial features will be great. This skin colour combination could also be used for Warhammer Fantasy Lizardmen, or even 𝐒𝐿𝐼𝐻, or 𝐒𝐄, as I like to call them. It makes them sound more sci-fi, I think. The metals were given a more reddish look to them by layering on a true copper paint. Eventually, as my army grows, there will be a mixture of metal variations. The premise is that the armour was made from all sorts of minerals that they could find, as the army grows in size quickly. So orcish precision and craftsmanship goes out the window. And once fielded on the battlefield, they will hopefully look pretty cool as a big army. Once the highlight of silver has been completed, some watered down black was added to the areas between the armour plates, and importantly, next to the cloth. This makes the different elements of the miniature more defined. The red cloth was also given that little bit extra to make it stand out more, by applying some Abomination Gore with Quick Shade Medium. I have found in recent months that using a normal medium with acrylic paints doesn't really reactivate the speed paint layer underneath, as it would do if we mixed it with water instead. For more information on speed paints and its potential to reactivate, which can be a great thing by the way, check out the New to Army Painter Speedpaints video. To make the folds in the cloth a lighter colour, some troll claws was added to the red on the palette and mixed in. This was just eyeballed until I got a colour that I liked. I felt that this gave a quite nice and natural highlight rather than a punchy bright red or pink, like you can see in the Moria Goblin video. Especially as these Morannons have a lot more cloth than our Pipsqueak cave dwelling counterparts. Which Morannon colour scheme do you like most out of these? And if you would like to see how to paint their brave and fearless enemy of the Minas Tirith, then check out this video right here. Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep on hobbying.